Good morning. This is Playing to Win with me, Mark Henderson Leary, and my good friend Brad Freyer. Good morning, Brad. How are you?
Good morning, Mark. How the heck are you, man?
Fantastic. Had a great weekend. Kind of
Yeah?
refreshed, ready to go into a very busy week that's going to stretch well beyond the weekend. So I got to get my endurance up and power through. And hopefully I'll get a nice break on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, which, as I say that out loud, I don't think happens. I don't think I get a break until May. What's the month after April? I think May. So I'll get my first real significant break. But how are you?
I'm good, man. Yeah, I'm actually coming off of that week. So last week was just absolutely slammed all the way through the weekend. I didn't finish until yesterday, about 7 o'clock. And but everything was great. Had a good week and good weekend, and got a pretty busy week this week. So ready to kick it back into gear.
It's a great time right now. I think optimism is pumping through everybody's veins that I'm speaking to, at least in the business world. There's details and logistics to figure out, but in general, people are buying stuff, doing things, moving money around, making ambitious investments in leadership. My client load is just really kind of moving up fast to the point where I really have to plan my time really well. So it's a good time. It feels great.
It does, and it's beautiful weather out. I mean, so not only does it feel great, but it feels great.
Yeah. Oh, so electric to be outside, which, hopefully when the weather gets nice, I start to get the anxiety of it's not going to last. It's going to be unbearably hot soon. So it's almost like I like it to be almost comfortably cool because I know I still feel like I got a little time left. As soon as it gets to be like perfectly cool, it's like, it's just dying. It's just like if you're not growing, you're dying, and if it's not cooling off, it gets heating up.
Well, we talked about it. We talked about it this weekend. We're sitting outside over at dinner, and we're talking about how long spring lasted last year, because we rolled from spring break into COVID, and really it felt like summer just was like, they've got COVID. We're just going to take it easy on them this year. I mean, because spring lasted until, it seemed like the end of May.
Yeah, that was exactly right. And I say that with this, I think the summers in Houston are so traumatic, for a couple of reasons. It gets really hot in July, and then it gets even hotter in August, and you think it cracks open, and then September doesn't really actually let up on you. And so, as you start we start moving towards Thanksgiving thinking, you're like, is it going to quit? And so it eventually lets go. But I've kind of mapped out the nice days out of the year in Houston, and there are a lot more than I keep remembering. It's just the trauma of the summer just kind of erases it from my memory.
That's fair. Yeah. August and September are just, they're oppressively hot. And then Halloween, there's always that tipping point, right? I remember as a kid, Halloween, you never knew if you were going to be hot in your costume or cold in your costume.
Oh my gosh.
Because you could get an early front and, feel very comfortable, or you could just be, sweating buckets and have to take off your plastic mask with the strap around the back. Your plastic Gene Simmons mask. You know the one I'm talking about.
Oh man, I don't want to go back in my childhood. I never liked scary stuff when I was a kid. I was like a clown and stuff like that. I was never that scary, bloody guy.
I have two daughters, 17 and 14, and I introduced them to Silence of the Lambs this weekend.
Say that again. What are the ages in Silence?
17 and 14.
Okay. 17, all cool. 14 thinks
the 14-year-old one was like, yeah, that's cool. The 17 was like, Dad, that could happen. She was like that.
You did, and you looked at her and said, "Yeah, it did, and it happens all the
Don't
time.
help creepy guys load a chair into a van if they're pretending to have a broken arm,
right?
And you won't end up in a pit putting lotion on the skin."
Right, write that down. Write that down. Because women and girls need more reasons to be afraid today. So let's write that down. So let's get into some content for today. We had a great conversation last time that we had two great subjects. The one that I threw out there, which was preparation and planning. And then right on the heels of that, I just sideswiped it and we talked about the dummy curve and spent the rest of the time talking about the dummy curve. So today, let's talk about the dummy curve for like a second and then sideswipe it with preparation.
Well, why would you want to talk about the dummy curve again?
Just to kind of work against myself.
But is there anything we need to cover that we haven't covered already? And scene. That's dummy curve. Thank you. That is the dummy curve. Thank you.
I was like, I see what he's doing here. I need another beat to respond. And
I had you
you
for a moment.
you absolutely did.
Son of a bitch.
As soon as I felt it, I was like,
Why is Brad doing this to me?
Well, the reason is the dummy curve is very powerful, though. Actually, and so I do to answer your question in a literal sense. The dummy curve is in preparation. The idea of preparation is so important, I believe. But I learned it the hard way that when I started preparing a little bit, I became advanced in my mind. And so I would, if I did some preparation for a call, I would start answering questions early, and I would say, I already know what your business does. And I already know why you would need this. And I've talked to your friends, and here's your quote. And so, the dummy curve, I had to learn that, like, no, that's not the way to do it. You have to diagnose, you have to let them explain things to you, and you've got to really slow it down to be a good doctor. You've got to follow the process and ask great questions and make no assumptions. That's the essence of the dummy curve. Make sure you have built into your process making no assumptions and putting that client prospect in a position of being heard and getting everything out on the table. So in the context of that, how do we prepare? What are the best ways to prepare so we don't work against ourselves?
Well, I mean, you hit an interesting point, because a lot of people say, hey, how much research should I do on an individual or a company before I do a sales call on them? And I think, to your point, I've always been the one that less is more. And I've always been the one that's less is more for two reasons. Number one is I don't want to waste pay time. And pay time is the time that you should be doing selling activity. I don't want to waste pay time doing research, because I know a lot of salespeople get sucked into doing copious amounts of research, feeling like they have to be uber prepared for the sales call or the presentation. So number one is I don't want to waste a lot of time. But number two is I don't want to go in with preconceived ideas of how the conversation is going to go. So for me, I do almost no research. And people will say, well, Brad, shouldn't you know at least what the company does or blah, blah, blah? Yeah, kind of. But if you don't, depending upon what you sell, a dummy curve approach is always, look, I didn't want to go in and do a ton of research because I didn't want to make any preconceived determinations before we sat down and had a conversation. So it's a very easy ground cover if you're concerned that you're going to look stupid or that you're going to look ill prepared. But if you state it as if, no, I did that on purpose. I don't do a lot of research because I don't want to come in with assumptions. And so, tell me what you guys
I'm glad you said that, because I've taken a similar approach. Having been through the years, I mean, I'm a high quick start anyway. The idea of sitting down and doing the preparation is hard for me, even though, and actually it's a contradiction, because I like to have the answers, but I rarely am so build it into my process well enough to have the time to have done that. Because I know some people who are really in the fact finder side. They really show up with, they know the history and have memorized, they know the pictures of everybody who's going to be in the room, and they know all that stuff. I'm not as good with that, and so. I know you got a point, holding on to it, but so what I've learned, and I think I learned a lot of it from, I learned a lot of it from you, is to just make sure I'm balancing that out, saying, don't make assumptions about what they need. And if I don't know, actually, this is where I think the highlight of my sales process of thinking is that when I don't know something that I think I should, I just call it out. And I just say, hey, this is probably something I should know, but I don't. And it's important that I find the answer out. Let's go there. And that's if there's one tool that I go to in that scenario, is that.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Cause the word or the phrase that came to my mind, which is something that I think is very helpful. I don't know that it's a prerequisite, but I think the most successful salespeople have it, which is mental agility.
Yeah.
Being able to ebb and flow and respond to what's given to you. And for people who don't have that mental agility to be able to be present, to listen, to process, to ask questions, they probably feel like they have to do a ton of research so that they have all the details and all the information in their head before they begin the conversation. You've got tremendous mental agility, so it's easy for for you to not go in and do the research, or at least not excessive amounts of research, so that you can be in the moment and respond to what the conversation gives versus building assumptions and trying to paint the picture before the prospect does.
Well, we talked about that last time too. My mental agility, good or bad, I don't want to paint it as necessarily good, because what it creates for me is an ability and even a desire to want to figure it out in my head, like connect the dots without asking them. And I've had to learn and coach myself to say, no, get it on the table. If there's a curiosity in the moment, don't hold on to it and see if you can figure it out later. Just ask it right then, because that's part of the process, is getting them involved. So preparation for me, I want to make sure we tie this down clearly in the context of preparation. It is getting myself in the mindset of slowing down. How am I going to challenge them? What questions am I going to ask? And I think that's probably the essence of preparation, is getting clearer on the questions than answers at all. It's not about answers; it's about questions.
Yeah. So when you're pre-call planning or preparing, do you have a format that you follow, or do you have kind of a template in your head? Or I know I have kind of a 5 bullet points that I go through before calls. But do you have any specific structure or key pieces that you like to cover beforehand?
I used to, and so I want to. There's an evolution. So depending on the type of sales organization I'm working with, or not sales, any organization and how they sell, it's going to be either this sort of template driven in a good way, like these are the things you need to not forget. And so that, I guess there's always that, like there's 3 or 4 bullet points I need to have a sense of. Don't forget to ask these essential questions. But with repetition into the same ideal target market, for me, it has evolved to just get ready to react to curiosity. Just get ready to observe. What did you notice? And what are you going to hear and challenge back to them? So I've moved very far away from the early days of a template-driven selling to this is very sophisticated observation. And I'm going to follow almost a rote script on their part, which is useless. That's going to happen on its own. I'm going to have to fish out all the unique things from the conversation. Why are we here? Why are we talking? What really matters to you? And what you just said to me doesn't actually pass the sanity check. Is there something else you actually want? Because when I'm having a conversation, I'm into really meaty, emotional, critical issues for a client or prospect.
Well, so but what you're telling me is that you've gone from knowing to owning. Right, because you're at the point now where like you just said 3 questions, and I don't remember exactly what they were, but what's the problem, and why is it important to you, or something like that. That's theoretically the Sandler pain funnel, right? Yeah, and so although you're saying, I'm not following, a stringent process, you've gotten to the point where you're doing it instinctually now, so the sniff test for you is, I know what important questions, or I know what, it's not about the questions anymore for you. It's about the answers.
Right.
And so you're looking for data, and so you know how to get there. But like for me, or for people who are new to the process, I think having a defined approach, because you have to go from that knowing to understanding to implementing to owning. And it's that transition. So you got it in your DNA now.
This is a great question, because you asked the question of, what's the process? And I didn't prepare for this conversation, because if I had, what I would have done was outlined each of those, because what I do is so consistent. It is exceedingly rigid. There are no changes in the steps in the process. So I don't think about it at all. It just happens, and I'm in the zone at each step. And what happens inside those steps is free flowing and real.
Yeah. It does this. It just kind of goes everywhere. But we're in the same compartment, the same.
Yeah, and it's contained.
Area.
It's contained.
Yeah.
Like, I don't wonder who's on the call. That's already decided. I'm not having to ask, Payne's budget decision with the CEO. That's already built into the process. I don't have conversations with people who are not in the position of authority. So I don't have to who else's opinion do we need to have in that? Like and that's critical for somebody who gets an inbound prospect call who's selling bolts.
All right, so let's give some content for those who aren't in that ownership level of processes, right? They don't have it in the DNA yet. So, first and foremost, what's the goal for the conversation, right? Bullet point 1. What's the goal? What's the point of our conversation? The biggest problem that I see salespeople have is that they don't have a clearly defined goal that makes sense. And so everything else around the planning goes to hell. Because if I ask a salesperson, hey, what's the goal for this call? What are some of the things I might hear them say if they haven't really thought about it? Well, I want to sell something, or I want to close some new business. Is that going to happen on this call? Well, no. Okay, so what's the goal for this call? Or they'll say, well, this is just an introductory conversation. That's your goal? It's an introductory conversation? Well, yeah. Okay, so it's going to go something like this. Hey, Mark, I'm Brad. Brad, Mark. Okay, good talk. We're done. We made introductions. That's the end. So having a good goal, right? Hey, this is going to be an initial conversation where I identify if they have a problem from a high level that we can solve. But that could be a goal for the first meeting. Do they have a problem? Can we spend time to identify if they have a problem that we can solve? That could be a goal for a first conversation. Second conversation, the goal is going to be different. Third conversation, goal is going to be different. But at the end of your time, what do you want to have achieved, right? So that's step 1. Step 2, manage expectations. Sandler terms, upfront contract.
Upfront contract. What's an upfront contract? It's so powerful and it's easy to forget. And I love it. And I get out of the habit. So
yeah. I mean, upfront contract. Have we managed the time, the agenda, and the potential outcomes, which includes a yes and a no, right? So if I'm setting an upfront contract or managing expectations for that goal I just shared, that this is going to be an initial conversation to identify if they have a problem that we can solve or not. My upfront contract or the expectations I'm going to set is, hey, Mark, look, I know we've got 20 minutes on the calendar. I was hoping we could spend a little bit of time helping me understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, right? Where are you now? Where are you trying to go? And what's keeping you from getting there? At the same time, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about us. At the end of our conversation, maybe we figure out one of two paths. Either A, we figure out that the problem that you have is something that we may be able to help with, and we can discuss what some next steps might look like. Or we might identify that what you're doing and what we do isn't a good fit, and I hope you feel comfortable sharing that with me. Is that fair?
That is fair. Why isn't an upfront contract important?
Okay. I don't know. Number one is managing time. Most buyers believe that salespeople are time wasters and they're going to consume their time and it's going to be a waste of time. So we want to manage the expectation of time. Number one is to make buyers feel comfortable. But number two is that we ask for the amount of time that we actually need to accomplish what we want to accomplish. For me, my initial phone call with someone is a 20 to 30 minute phone conversation just to identify if they have a problem that I can help with. From there, I usually schedule a 90-minute meeting where we take a deep dive. I need 90 minutes because if the conversation unfolds accordingly, it's going to take that long. But I've had people push back, well, Brad, I don't know that I have 90 minutes to set aside. Say, look, let's block it off. That way we have it if we need it. But if we figure out 20 or 30 minutes in the meeting, we don't need all that time, we're not going to use it. We can always bail early. So we want to manage the time because it just creates mutual respect for time. The agenda. We want to give the agenda so both parties knows how we're going to use our time, right? And then the next steps. The yes option. At the end of the meeting, let's make sure we know where we're going next because, Mark, you and I have talked all the time about the circle back, follow up, touch base.
Yeah, we got to connect. And so would you prefer that we touch base or circle back?
Yeah. So at the end of the meeting, we want to make sure we use a few minutes to create a clearly defined next step without these obtuse, vague, wishy-washy words.
Yeah.
But then for me, I believe one of the most important pieces of the upfront contract is the no option and verbalizing that, hey, if what we do and what you're looking for is not a fit, that's okay. Because so many of the problems that are created in the sales process are because buyers don't feel comfortable telling salespeople no. Because salespeople historically have not taken no as an answer. And
so I want to pause on the whole concept right now, because we talk about preparation.
Yeah.
And I think you could sum up our mutual feelings, and you taught me well. Most of what I teach and do is what you personally taught me, is that the upfront contract, which is the goals, objectives, expectations being aligned, getting what you need, giving what they need. That's not easy to do, winging it very often. And so preparation goes to that. Like if you're going to do one thing in preparation, it is figure out the upfront contract. What do you need out of the call, out of the conversation, the meeting, whatever it is, so you can clearly articulate it, get on the same page with them, and that no option, which is pervasive, see if that's what they want. Because if they don't want that, then what are you good? You're wasting their life and yours. So you have to make sure that you give the no option is so powerful. That's a whole other live stream and podcast and everything, all the psychology that goes into that. But I can't stress it enough.
That would be a good one to talk about the psychology behind no. Yeah.
So I think that you could sum up preparation with all the way down to when you set expectations. How much time do you need? Where's the conversation going to go? How is this going to play out? Who's going to be in what role? And what is the option for you both to say this conversation is over? Because with all due goodwill, the no option is based in all due goodwill.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's about peer-to-peer selling. Our belief system is we would love to have you as a client, but if it's not a good fit, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's not a good fit forever. Maybe it's just not a good fit for now. And the better I manage the conversation, the better I manage the relationship and the dynamics, the more likely they're going to want to talk to me again should the opportunity ever arise where it is a good fit. Mm-hmm. And so there's so much value from that. So we're setting the goals for the call. We're managing the expectations. The third bullet point, because I want to make sure we actually accomplish the pre-call planning that we talked about for 2 weeks in a row now. The third bullet point is what questions are we going to ask, but also what questions might we be expected to answer? And so do we have our top 5 to 7 questions? If you have a process, you talked about pain budget decision. If you follow a consistent process, you know what the questions are going to be. And so, when I have that first initial 20 to 30 minute phone call with a prospective client, I know what questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask 5 to 6 questions. And then
that's so great. I want to dig into that for just a quick sec, because there's a quantum difference between I've got your solution, this is going to work, and I've already got it, just sign here, which is not the answer you need. Flip it around to like, well, this sounds good. I like you. What is this going to cost? I don't know. You don't know. That's so frustrating for me. Like, you have no clue. Like, well, I don't have a clue. Like, I get that you need to do some scoping. I get you need to ask some questions, but you can't even guess between $10 and $10 million. That's a lame sales answer. You need an answer to that question, even if it's, got parameters around it. Speak to that concept.
So, at the end of the day, depending upon where we get asked that question in the sales process, right? Sometimes we get asked, hey, what's this going to cost very early in the sales process before it's time to naturally have that conversation. When it happens too early in the sales process, it's not that we don't want to answer it. It's that we're doing a disservice to the process if we answer it before we've truly identified if we're even a good fit yet. Right? And so there's a half dozen ways to answer it effectively from, Mark, I appreciate you asking that question. That typically comes up on page 6. We're only on page 2. Is there a reason why that's such an important piece now? Is there a reason why that came up now?
And,
right?
and I'll role play that with you for a second, or practice. And I'll say, well, I just want to know if we're kind of in the ballpark. I've never bought a service like this before, and I don't know if this is $100 a month or $10,000 a month. And I sure would hate to waste your time if you give me the best solution in the world and it's out of my budget by a zero. That would be a shame.
No, and I respect that tremendously, right? Because I feel the same way. I mean, at the end of the day, there's several pieces of information that I still need to get to know where you guys fall in that range. Big picture, though, based on what the little that I know from you, it could be anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 a year. If by the end of our conversation, I can probably get that whittled down to a more narrow bracket. Would it make sense if we spend a little bit more time discussing so that I could give you a better target, or is that entire range out of the realm of possibility for you?
No, and I love that question. Is it doable? Are you out of the ballpark? Or you're in the range here? And typically what I find early enough in the sales process, you'll get somebody say, well, if it's high value enough, then we could do it. Or no, I don't have that much money to pay myself right now. And that's it. And it doesn't matter how amazing it is, I can't do it. And I think that the tie down on preparation there is so important. If you haven't talked that question through, you aren't going to be able to say that. So you as a sales team, as a leader, you have to have those questions answered. So if they say, no, that's way out of my budget, you got to feel good that was probably true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge believer in triggered responses. And triggered responses are, what are the top 5 to 7 questions that you get asked that can potentially be confrontational, create conflict, uncomfortable, deal breakers? And have you practiced what your response is going to be to where it's a triggered response, right? When someone says, well, hey, Brad, you know what? We've looked at a lot of different options. What makes you guys different? Why is Sandler different? If I get asked that question, I have a triggered response. If someone says, well, gosh, how much is this going to cost? I've got a triggered response. If someone says, well, do you guarantee your work? I've got a triggered response. Hey, Brad, do you have industry experience? Have you ever worked in our industry before? I have a triggered response. And the planning and preparation for a triggered response is so that I don't rely on emotion and reaction, right? Because as soon as they ask a question that gets me nervous or gets me anxious, my emotion goes up. And we all know that when emotion goes up, intellect goes down. And so if I have these triggered responses prepared, hey, what questions could I get asked and how am I going to answer it? Then I can reel in and control my emotion and just have an intellectual response based on preparation versus trusting my gut in the heat of the battle.
It's great stuff, man. We're getting close to time here, so I want to make sure we wrap up all of our points.
Shit. All right. So there's goals, there is expectations, there's the key questions that we need to ask and need to be expected to answer. And then the last 2 pieces are, the fourth one is, what are the possible outcomes? If the meeting goes good, what does that look like? If the meeting goes bad, what does that look like? And what if the meeting's just a big nothing burger, right? There's nothing accomplished, nothing resolved, just kind of, how would we handle that? And then the 5th bullet point are, based on those potential outcomes, what would a healthy next step be? We need to know what a next step is or what it should be before we start the meeting, so that at the end of the meeting, we know how to create a path forward, so that it doesn't end up being, hey, Mark, circle back with me and touch base with a couple of follow-ups a few weeks from now, right? No, we want to be definitive. And so if we haven't thought about what those next steps are before the end of the meeting, and then we're put on the spot, well, what do you suggest we do from here? Well, maybe we could just touch base in a couple of weeks and chat.
So what I love about all this is that the preparation is not about getting into the weeds of the client. The preparation is about having ourselves in check, understanding our best questions and the things that can come from that, and understanding each of the steps we need to be in integrity with and be plugged into to create a good outcome for everybody, to be in control, to feel in control, and to really be at our best. I think that's the essence of it. Preparation is not about reading that website until it's memorized. It's about being ready to be your best in front of the client, the prospect. Makes sense.
Love it.
Anything else before we wrap us up? We're almost out of time here.
No, I like the idea of maybe talking about some of these things we touched on earlier, the no option, maybe talking about how do you handle some of these questions that come up too early in the process. But yeah, good stuff. Always
yeah, we could probably
Mondays together.
Let's in future calls we can dissect the upfront contract and all the pieces of the process. It's fantastic stuff. So in the meantime, to summarize today, prepare to be your best. Don't get caught up in the weeds. Get caught up in the questions and curiosity, and have the answers you're going to need to have that lead to a good, positive, constructive next steps, not that end the conversation prematurely. And always make sure you've got a healthy exit in the process in the form of a no. You don't want somebody to feel trapped. And there's a whole psychology and a whole series of things we could do to talk about that in the future. But until then, I think you and I need to talk. I think we're going to be skipping next Monday. So we'll see the team, everybody, in 2 weeks, and have a great week. Until then, play to win. We'll see you next time.
Be well.